when it
Hey,
comes to resume.
by the way, we're going live,
Okay.
but go ahead. We can talk while we're live.
Well, no, I use the word "it depends." They'll say, "Well, how far back should I go on my resume?" Well, it depends. Or how many jobs should I list on there? It depends.
There's an absolute answer to that. There's a very non-squishy answer to that.
Good.
Definitive
All right.
is the word.
So we're live on Facebook, folks. We're about 3 minutes from going live to getting started.
They'll say, "Well, how far back should I go on my resume?" Well, it depends.
So
Let me follow you here, Teddy.
I'm gonna hit the broadcast button and we'll broadcast. Randy, you might want to go grab that NC Live.
I am
NC Wise Man.
here right now, and if I hit save, that's not what I need. I need to hit share,
You find it?
and I found share. Sunny is not there though. I only see share. So share now with the public.
So I'm going to broadcast and bring the people in, and I'm going to hit. I don't need to hit record because we don't need to record. We're going live.
Right on.
All right, cool. Lynda, are you good to go?
I'm ready.
Are you buckled in and you have your big girl boots on and you're ready to deal with these two wackos?
I think I can handle it. We New York City girls are tough.
And Randy, I'm glad to see that you and I dressed appropriately today.
I did. I actually, and there was a guy on network TV. I saw a reporter was online somewhere this morning. Dude he had a blazer and he had a nice shirt on, but
No pants.
he had no pants, right?
I saw that too.
They went for a high shot down and they saw this dude's, creamy white thighs clear up way too high. He had boxers on. That's about all he was wearing.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. So, but I'm fully dressed today, and actually I wore a shirt. So
I'm fully dressed today too.
Yeah, I am so grateful, Lynda, that you have changed your ways.
I know. A freewheeling only goes so far.
Yeah, daggone Yankee.
I gotta ask you. I'm a Red Sox fan, so are we gonna have issues here with you today? Or are you a Yankee? Or are you?
I was born a few yards away from Yankee Stadium.
So you're a Yankees fan. So also a Rangers fan?
Not into hockey at all.
Okay, Knicks.
Oh, please. I mean, they're terrible, but but yes, although it was, my kids live in Brooklyn and they were born in Brooklyn. So I kind of like the Nets too, but
So Giants?
I'm sorry?
Giants, New York Giants.
Definitely the Giants, not the Jets, although my daddy would be turning in his grave if he heard that. But we're such a Knicks family that my 38-year-old son invited two of the Knicks to his bar mitzvah.
All right, we got 1 minute before we go and get really, really serious. So we got a minute worth of jokes. So Randy, you got a bucket full of them. You got a corny joke you want to throw out?
I hadn't really prepared for that.
We have 17,000 viewers, buddy.
I'll tell you what, I like to have fun and I use a lot of analogies, acronyms, or whatever. But if we get time today, we can talk about STDs and geese. I know we're going to talk about geese at some point, but STDs, that stands for something, not the health thing. But
yeah,
it helps people to remember and keep that structure when they're in an interview if they can remember certain phrases or acronyms. And
I need to close my door so my kids don't hear your jokes.
No, I got a friend of mine who's from New York. He lives in this area, but he is a Rangers, Knicks, Giants, and he's rubbing it in when the Yankees beat my Red Sox. And when the Giants make it to the Super Bowl, it just so happens they happen to play New England. And so
if there is a team, I can deal with the Red Sox, but if there is a team I loathe, it's the Pats. I mean, they are evil.
All right, we have 2,100 people on here. Okay, 21,000 people on here.
Okay.
And there are a few people on here who are trying to figure out what STD stands for, Randy, and most of them are trying to be professional about it. Rita's trying. Inez has got it. So as far as being professional.
STD, when they ask you what's your strength or what are you, a skill, what are you good at? Most people will just say, well, I'm dependable or I'm hardworking or whatever, and they just leave it there. So the S and the T and the D is to mention the strength, the title and company where you did it, and D is to describe it. Give an example. And I think that's something too that, Lynda, you're going to talk about today as it relates to soft skills on a resume, is to give an example of that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think unfortunately in the interviews, people just get frozen and they sit there and they give the answer and then they don't follow it up. And so that's a silly way of remembering how to handle that question.
Good one. I like it.
All right. So we have 1,000 people on Facebook.
Woo.
And we have 23,000 people here. So let's get started. We good? Hey, everybody. This is Teddy Burris and my sidekick, Mr. Randy Wooden. Don't get to wave.
There it is.
Our special guest today is Lynda Spiegel, and you're going to get a kick out of this. You're going to get a kick out of the conversations because Lynda brings some professionalism all around the conversation about resumes. Lynda has her business is, let me go back to it so I say it right, Rising Star Resumes. Lynda is a professional resume writer and a professional LinkedIn profile writer. And Lynda and I met, I'll tell you exactly when Lynda and I met. Lynda and I met back at August 7th of 2017. You didn't know that, did you?
I didn't look it up. It just feels like we've known each other a long time, Teddy.
Yeah. So anyway, Randy and I decided to bring Lynda in to bring this conversation about professional resumes. Lynda, you want to introduce yourself as a person and your business a little bit more?
Sure. Hi, everybody from New York City. So my background is in human resources, and I was the person who decided whether or not your resume was ever going to make it to the hiring manager. So I was the gatekeeper. And when I left the corporate world back in 2014, it occurred to me I've got a really unique perspective on what it takes to get a resume notice. So I started Rising Star Resumes, and that's basically I've been in business since January 2014. Yeah. And I've been really, what I'm especially proud of is that my clients just come back to me and just say they've done incredibly well, which is like so gratifying.
Yeah. Do you have fun doing what you're doing?
I love what I'm doing.
Good.
I just love it. Every client is unique. And even if I have, 10 clients with the same career, everyone is unique. And that's really kind of the philosophy behind the way I write them. Because let's say you're an accounts receivable person, right? Well, everybody who's an accounts receivable or everybody who's a marketing manager, basically that you're doing the same functions. So how do you differentiate yourself in the resume? And that's what I love about it. Everybody is different. And that's what I try to bring to the resume and the profile.
Cool. Good. Hey, housekeeping. Steve, good to see you out there. Appreciate it. I sent a message to everybody out there. Use the Q&A. That's the box at the bottom of your screen below where you see Randy, Lynda, and I. It says Q&A, and ask questions, because when you ask questions, that's how we will help you in a greater way. Other housekeeping is this is going live on Facebook. I'm going to save it on YouTube. So if you do anything ridiculous or stupid, it's going to be seen by the world. Got that, Randy?
It's too late. Sorry.
And we've already got a guest set up for next week. We'll tell you about that later. You'll get some value out of that as well. That's what our purpose is. So on, Randy, anything you need to start with?
Well, other than to say thanks for joining us, Lynda, and for those that are tuned in, this is our 4th show that we've done, and I can tell you I've had excellent feedback from Facebook, from LinkedIn. So we're doing the right thing, and it's fun. We have fun. It's during lunch, so whether somebody's employed or they're not, it's a fun lunchtime, and I'll have a little fun, learn a few things, and it's a way for, I guess, us to keep our sanity too when you really get
And our expectations are that next week our sponsors will show up. We're Randy and I are working to get sponsorship. Our goals are to make $10,000 per episode a piece. Yes, Lynda, we'll throw some biscuits to our guests, and that's pure satire, folks. All right, so Lynda, let's do this.
Okay.
I want to ask you a few questions, and you can help me understand.
Sure.
And I think you and I come about this in some respects the same way. But here's the question. Should a resume be a marketing document, or should it be your almost ready to be published, nearly done obituary?
It is definitely a marketing document. Okay, so a lot of people think that everything they've done from the first day they started working until now belongs on their resume, and that is completely inaccurate. This is a marketing tool, and its goal is to get you an interview.
Yeah. So you're saying that I should not put on my resume that in 19 never you mind, I picked up trash in the morning and delivered caskets just in time in the afternoon.
Whoa, that went dark. That went dark real fast.
True story.
Okay, actually no, because let's just, listen, I was a babysitter, I taught English, and that has nothing to do with my career in human resources. So if I were still in the job market, obviously I'd be looking for a job at the same level or a higher level in human resources. And what in the world is having taught English or what did you do with caskets or,
or a babysitter?
Yeah, and a lot of times people will put down that they were a camp counselor or that they were a cashier at Duane Reade. That's a drugstore in New York. If it's not relevant to your career, it doesn't belong on your resume. And if it's older than 15 years, it does not belong on your resume with some exceptions. Yeah,
I get it. You use the word that I use for everything that I do, relevance. If it's not relevant, don't get it. Hey, Lynda, Steve asked this. Should the resume be written for each specific job you're applying for?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, Steve. So there are two opinions on this. I'll tell you what one is yes and one is no. My opinion is absolutely not, and I'll explain why, and then you can determine, you can decide what makes sense to you. So my reason for not having different variations on your resume is that unless you have multiple personality disorder, you're still the same person, right? Teddy is excused. No, seriously, you're the same person with the same experience and the same value proposition. So when people talk about tweaking or tailoring their resume for each specific job, what I think they're mostly saying is, well, maybe I emphasize this function over another function. But why? You are who you are, and the sum total of your experiences, where relevant, is what makes you an attractive candidate. Now, there are other people who feel differently, and I don't know that it makes a huge difference, but I'll tell you this, you try to keep track of every permutation of your resume and then try to figure out which one you sent to whom if someone calls you, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Steve says thanks. Steve says thanks. So Inez wants to know this. You said leave anything 15 years or older, get rid of it, except for some exceptions. And she wants to know what those exceptions are.
Okay, let's say you started a position more than 15 years ago and it overlaps. So in that case, okay, put in your start date. Other people, like I had a client who worked in the Clinton White House, worked for a well-known senator from Colorado, but that was back in the early 90s. Now, that's just too sexy to leave out. So instead of having it in a linear timeline fashion on the resume, going back years and just screaming, look how old I probably am, you just reference it. in the summary of qualifications at the top, you'd say earlier in my career, I worked, in communications for President Bill Clinton and for Senator, Cory Gardner of Colorado, which wouldn't happen, but you get my point.
I do. Good. I get that. Yeah. Good stuff. It is a marketing document, and you got to think marketing. You can't think Teddy's satirical perspective of it. You're developing obituary. So, cool. Hey, good questions. Anybody else have a question? Use the chat box. So, Lynda, let's do this question then.
Sure.
Okay. When you're building your resume, you in your marketing document, you could speak to everything you've got. And your cigarette lighter, your cup holders, the fact that your window thing walkers are automatic up and down, and your oh crap handles and your wheel lugs. You could talk about all your accomplishments. I do the analogy of your brochure as your.
Okay, I'm trying to figure this one out.
Like buying a car. Okay, the brochures, when you look at a Ford F-150 brochure, they do not talk about cup holders and cigarette lighters, that kind of stuff. And the analogy back to resumes is you could list every single one of your accomplishments, or maybe specific accomplishments.
Okay, so I want to differentiate two things that need to be understood on a resume. One is accomplishments, and the other are functions.
Yeah.
Okay, a good resume is going to rely more on the accomplishments, and they should not be buried under each job when you have bullets with your responsibilities. But at the top, what I do is under the summary of qualifications, which by the way, should always be written in the first person, always. But right under that, so at the top of the screen, when a recruiter or a hiring manager is opening the document on a monitor or on a laptop, you want it on the top of the screen, the stuff that's going to compel them to keep reading. So I have a section called career highlights or selected accomplishments, depending on my client. And then I get very specific. So instead of saying I write newsletters, marketing materials, et cetera, I will have as an example, I know. And this is on my resume. I wrote an article for a major New York City newspaper that changed New York State's legislation. Okay, now, do I have to say I'm an excellent communicator? I have excellent written and verbal communications? No, I just showed you. I changed New York State, or something I wrote changed legislation in New York State.
Yeah, I get it. Accomplishments, real stuff.
Right. So I encourage my clients, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and other times I want to say to the person, did you rest on the seventh day? But basically I want to get very granular, and I want examples of things that you've done. And this, I don't care how far back it goes, because we're not assigning a date or necessarily an employer to it. What did you do that tells me as the employer that you have these skills that you would, a lot of people just throw words without context. This gives context to those keywords that everyone thinks is so important to have in the resume.
Yeah. Randy?
Yeah, Lynda, you mentioned just now keywords. Can you give examples of those? And I guess where I'm going with this is hard skill versus soft skill. So talk that.
Well, do you want me to explain about keywords, or do you want me to talk about hard skill versus soft skill? Because those are two different issues.
Well, but they're both words is my point. And so when people talk about keywords, is a keyword the term hardworking, or is a keyword procurement? They're both words, and so they both have some level of importance. But when you talk about keywords in your mind, what are keywords? Okay,
keywords on a very technical level are words that will juice the applicant tracking system software. So the software that an employer uses to parse resumes that come in, and that's what happens when it says click here to upload your resume. That means software is going to be reading it. So the software is programmed to look for certain keywords. Okay, and if those keywords don't match up, or they're not, you know, they're not, the density of those keywords isn't great enough, your perfectly good resume gets kicked out. But a lot of people who know that about applicant tracking system software will say, okay, well, I'm just throwing in as many of the keywords that I've seen in all of the job postings that I've applied to. I'm just listing them under skills, which is bringing it back to your question. And my answer is, keywords without context are meaningless. And let's break that down to soft skills. Soft skills like hardworking, team player, any of those kinds of things. How in the world do you back that up? Mm-hmm. You know, that's a real I said situation. But if you can give an example of it. So a lot of people like to say, you know, they work well with others. So I would say, give me an example of how you influenced senior management to do something, how you achieved consensus in your team, where people were debating a point. Let's say you're a blue collar worker and you don't have any of that kind of autonomy. Well, you can talk, if you want to prove that you're hardworking, you could say regularly work consecutive shifts with little relief, or put in X number of hours of over, you know, something that quantifies or qualifies those words about yourself. Yeah. With respect to hard skills, that's much easier. Just give me an example of something you did that that was really well done, that utilized those hard skills.
Let me follow up with that too, because I agree with you. And
well, of course you agree with me.
I agree with you. How important is it to quantify achievements versus
extremely
saying increased? So a question that I get, so it is important to quantify with percent, dollar amount, number of square feet, budget, whatever. A lot of times our clients don't have necessarily access to documentation to specifically back that up. So in that case, how do you work through that issue?
Sure, and not only might it be a case of them not having access, sometimes the information is proprietary and they're not at liberty to disclose it. So you can, let's say you have a client, like let's say you did some kind of work with a major name brand Fortune 50 company, but you really can't say their name, right? Because then you'll get in a whole boatload of trouble. So what you do is say, you know, you did X for a Fortune 50 financial services company, and then people will go, oh, it was Citigroup, JP Morgan, you know, they can figure it out. It doesn't matter what the name was, because you gave it the context, a reference point. If we're talking about dollar amounts, and this is particularly important for salespeople. I actually got a client who was in tech sales, and there wasn't one iota of quantifying data on his resume. Now, if you're in sales, you know what they say, you're only as good as your last quarter. Right. So I would have people say, well, I made President's Club in 2010. That was 10 years ago. Okay. And I take all that stuff out. But even if you're not permitted to disclose the actual dollar amounts, you can talk about percentage increases. You can talk about how many new territories you expanded into. You can do it that way. So, you know, you basically don't ever want to get yourself into hot water by revealing something proprietary, but there's always a way to say it.
Sure.
So Steve just stated, based on earlier conversation, that he puts the company size, the number of employees on each one of his line items for his resume. What are your thoughts?
Who cares, Steve? I don't care, and I'm HR.
Yeah,
I don't
said so they can show larger or smaller companies is why he does that. But
you know what? Here's like my overarching philosophy. I'm like the haiku of resumes. and I'm saying this, Steve, as a person whose job it was to read these all day long, in addition to all the other HR things I had to do, okay? The human eye gets really tired. So the more information you have on the resume that is not essential to your value proposition, the less real estate I would give it. For example, if you work for Teddy Burris Inc. in, where are you, Winston-Salem?
Yep.
And why would you put Winston-Salem, North Carolina on the resume? It doesn't say anything about you, the resume writer. It just says that's where Teddy Burris Inc. was located. So that goes off the resume. The months you worked in a place, that can go on a job application. Leave it off the resume. All right, Steve is saying, okay, I get it. Stop. The point is, you might want to say that, Steve, about a client. So if you did something for a client, like let's say you created an application for human resources for a company with 35,000 global employees, that I'd put on the resume.
Got it. John asked this, doesn't adding or changing keywords lead to matching your resume to multiple jobs?
It could, but again, I would just include the keywords. Listen, you're not applying to jobs that are radically different from one another, right? I mean, if you are
Well, that's a big question.
It is a big question, but I'm going to, listen, I actually have two resumes. I was a professor of English at the City University of New York, so I have a teaching resume. It's really more like a CV with books I've published. But I'm also a human resources executive, okay? So I get that, but if you have, if I'm applying for a job, it's a human resources resume, right? There's not that many differences in keywords. So what I would do, if one company is, companies sometimes use different nomenclature. So just look at it in the aggregate at what the job postings that you're interested in, and just sprinkle in as many variations, synonyms for those keywords as you can, and then you're covered.
Yeah, and this goes back to a conversation I think we're going to have in the not too distant future, and that is, what jobs are you applying for? Willy-nilly, desperate, random, all over the place? Or do you have focus?
So back in 2015 or 14, I don't remember what year, I wrote an article that went viral on LinkedIn. It was called 253 Jobs I Didn't Get and Why. And it described how during the first time in my life, when I found myself unemployed, I just started doing what so many people do. I would just apply to every single job that I saw that had human resources in it on my level, right? I just look at upload cover letter, and oddly enough, I didn't get hired at any of them, because you apply for things, you apply for positions that, number one, you actually are qualified for, one, and two, that you really want to do. And then I tell my clients no more than 3 per week, because it's a lot of work. You want to go on to LinkedIn. You want to put the company name. This is one of the 3 companies per week you want to apply to. You put that company name in the search bar, and then you click on people who work there. And then you do one of 2 things. Do you have any second-degree connections who work there? You get a hold of those people. Let's say you don't. Look at the titles of the people and figure out, based on the title, who might be the person this position reports to, and get in touch with that person directly.
Yeah. Kaisha, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. So you're saying that KSAs, and then she's wrote the word key skills, are now put on the resume in full sentence form. I perceive that what she's asking is, do we tell a story about our skills?
Well, you interpreted it the way I would interpret it. And Keisha, I wouldn't say sentence, I would say bullet, because again, a sentence requires a lot of small words that aren't necessary, and we want to keep the eye focused on the main thing. So bullets, yes, your resume should, beautifully put, Teddy, should tell the story. It should tell your professional brand story. So context, context, context.
Randy, any thoughts?
Yeah, and Key and I work together for Goodwill, and we're teaming up on a project actually that'll air next week at 1:30. So
I'm sorry, I pronounced your name incorrectly, Kia.
No, it's all good. I butcher it. Everybody does, and just like they butcher my last name a lot. So it just, we are what we are. But typically, we historically anyway, at the top of the resume below the name, and I want to talk that too about what would go at the top of the resume in terms of your personal information. But below that, there would be some short, and in your case, it looks like bulleted profile or summary or something that kind of hooks the reader. I think that's where you're going, right? Is you want to hook the reader. Let's talk about that that top piece. What goes up in that resume beside your name? What other identifying information should we still use today?
Sure, you don't need your street address, unless the only virtue for that is if you want to make it really clear to your potential employer that you're within commuting distance. It's usually not necessary. For some jobs, you might feel it is, so that's the only time I put in your street address. But you want your LinkedIn profile URL, and you want to make sure it's been customized, which takes 2 seconds to do. And, you know, I can provide that in the show notes, or however you do that. But you should have your LinkedIn profile URL, your cell phone number, and you don't have to put cell or mobile in front of it. A phone number is a phone number. You don't want to put your landline because recruiters only call once, you know, especially now with this horrible situation we're in, where we went from a buyer's market to a seller's market. There's going to be so many applications for every job. They're only calling once if they're interested. So make sure it's your mobile, because that's what you have with you all the time. So that's what you want at the very top.
So name, right? So name, phone number, email address.
Definitely.
And LinkedIn URL, not the street.
Not necessarily, and it should go in this order. Your name at the top. If you're using your street address underneath it, if not, your LinkedIn profile's URL, and to the right of it, on the right side of the page, so it doesn't get buried, so it's real easy for the person to see, your mobile phone number, and then under that, under your URL, the email address. Yeah. And by the way, it should not need to be said, but you really want to make sure you have a professional sounding email address.
I fixed it, Lynda. Okay, I fixed it. Okay,
it's about time. Now, you can't believe some of the ones I've seen. And by the way, you know, if you have an AOL email address, could you please make it Hotmail, or Gmail is the most popular, or Yahoo, but we don't use AOL addresses anymore.
That's what I was going to ask you. Are there certain, just like you leave off your home in part because you're right, the recruiter is only going to call one number, but the other one is only old guys like Teddy and me have a landline. I mean, realistically, right? Teddy, you don't have a landline anymore, huh?
No, I'm sophisticated, dude.
I have a landline.
I hear you. I hear you.
All right, let's see. What? Hey, remember, folks, use the Q&A and ask Lynda questions so that we can give you the answers you need. So don't see. There's another question I had in my mind. Don't just claim it. I see this all the time. People say, I solved this third world problem, or I'm the guy that built the wall that protects the government from, stupid stuff. They make these huge claims, or they make claims all over the place, but they can't support it with story, and they can't support it throughout the rest of their resume. What are your perspective on making claims on your resume?
Yeah, I mean, you want to walk a fine balance between giving away the secret sauce and just saying I did this cool thing. So, you know, I have some clients who just feel that they have to explain everything about how they did it, and no, you want to pique the person's interest, so they say, I got to bring this person in for an interview and find out how they did that. So don't give it all away, and also don't just say I did this cool thing. Like, give it a little context, and you know, just make it sound intriguing enough that they want to bring you in to learn more about it.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing about making statements in public, and a resume is a public document, is it's pretty easy nowadays for me to go over to LinkedIn and find that person that worked with Lynda at that company at Mellon Investors or American Stock Transfer, you know, and call up my buddy that you used to work with and say, tell me about this lady, because she says she made it all happen.
Right, right. You know, so you bring up that leads to a little segue that I hope you don't mind me going down. A lot of people put on their resumes, you know, like participated in or helped do something. And when I change it to stronger verbs, they'll say, well, I don't want anyone to get the impression that I did it by myself.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line between making it sound like you did it by yourself and not giving yourself enough credit. But at the end of the day, what should guide you is, are you telling the truth?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, in a fact check easy world, you just, first of all, you shouldn't lie anyway, you know, that's a sin. But you just, like, you get called out on it, you look really bad. But on the other hand, you also don't want to denigrate any kind of, you know, what your value was to the role.
And that presents a challenge for those in senior management, because maybe the sales volume was higher, but these guys weren't the ones that were out there beating the streets to make the sales.
Right. So you could say, I presided over a team of sales personnel who brought in X number.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, of new logos or X dollar amount of revenue. So you're giving them the credit for doing the work, but you're giving yourself the credit for having led them.
So another question came in. As an older person, did you send this in, Randy? I didn't. As an older person, how do you handle the fact that my last job title seems to be a lower rank than the past director levels, which I believe he's positioning that he would rather have, I believe, the director level works, but the last job was a lower rank.
Yeah, that's always a problem, you know, and I'm going to ask this person a question. If he or she can, try to respond to it in the chat. Did you take this lower level position because you needed a job and that's what was available, or was it a job you really wanted?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of reasons for us to take other jobs that may not, because remember, our career doesn't do this, you know, but we've got to be able to speak to this.
So what I would say is, like, I have quite a few clients who, let's say they lost their job doing supply chain logistics. And in order to keep a roof over their head, they just took, they started selling real estate. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with driving a truck or anything that you do that's honest and, you know, and professionally handled, but it doesn't belong. You're better off having an employment gap than sort of letting employers know, hey, I was desperate and I took this job as a filler. I would rather you said, took family leave, because no one's allowed to question you on that, and everyone has a family and with a problem. So I'd rather you might want to consider leaving that position off, or if it wasn't that much of a demotion, just, you know, apply for the job on the level you belong and then just hopefully speak to it. The titles unfortunately matter, and you can't monkey with that.
Yeah, and he came back and offered that the last job, their titles were very flat. It was exactly the same role as a director level. It's just they didn't give him a title.
Then don't worry about it, because what we'll do is just make sure that that those selected accomplishments or career highlights, that's going to be the first, that's going to be something they see before your title at your most recent job.
Yeah, or before they worry about what the title means.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, tell a good story. I'm a a cat wrestler, but I'm gonna tell you a story about how I solve third world problems. So, Lynda asks, what formatting tips do you have for resumes so they don't look like templates that we downloaded from Microsoft Office?
Oh, bless you for asking that, similarly named Lynda.
I think that was on my list of questions for you.
Yep.
Well, here's the answer, and you're going to love it. Never download a template and never use a template, because templates have a very hard time passing through the applicant tracking system software. What I use, and my clients get interviews. It's a simple Word document. You don't need a template. You set it up so the margins aren't, you use I use an Arial 11 font for the main text. A pop of color, you can make the headings, a nice color. Make sure your margins aren't too wide, too narrow, and just write it on a Word document. It will pass through beautifully on the applicant tracking system software. And guess what? The person who's actually reading it is going to be so pleased to have a non-busy, easy to digest document.
So shouldn't we, Lynda, like have the top part name be one font, and the other section would be a different font, maybe, different size, and then should we have 3 columns?
No columns. If you want to make, you have no idea how many people come to me and say, I've never gotten any response to my applications, and I have them send me their resumes and they've PDF'd it. Never PDF your darn resume, because applicant tracking system software can't read a PDF. It just went poof, spit out into cyberspace. Don't put things in columns. It can't read columns. Okay? And as for fonts, if you want to make the reader's mind dizzy, yeah, go ahead and use a bunch of different fonts. Don't italicize unless it's the name of a book or the name of a publication. I wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal gets italicized. Nothing else on your resume gets italicized. Like I said, I use an Arial font. Any sans serif font is good. Okay. You can change the size of the font. Obviously, you want your name in like a size 16 Arial, and I do the the headings in a size 13, and I put the name and the headings in a color. So,
I'll back off the column stuff. I'm okay with that, and I won't use hieroglyphics in my resumes anymore. By the way,
but you can walk like an Egyptian.
Yeah, and you may remember this. Randy knows this. I've never gotten a job with a resume. I've never used a resume. But anyway, I'm an odd man. I've never had an interview either.
Well, I have.
Yeah, and I get it. And a lot of people have. It's just I'm blessed that my journey has been such that I've never had to have an interview, and that's very unique. But here, Steve says, he wants to know how many pages. I'm thinking that, I'm going to tell my story. It's going to take 3 or 4 pages. How many pages?
Okay, there's an urban legend that a resume has to be 1 page, and that's complete nonsense. There is nobody on the face of the earth who stopped reading a good resume because it went on to page 2. But it shouldn't be longer than that.
Good.
Learn how to tell a story, like Ernest Hemingway, think haiku. Like, there are words that have power, and you use those words, but that's a real easy thing. If it fits on 1 page organically, then fine, but otherwise it's going to be 2 pages.
I think this is our second conversation we've had, Randy, where someone used this phrase, words have power.
They do. And by the way, I saw a question pop up. Someone asked no PDF, and the answer is no PDF.
Now,
and think about it, for heaven's sakes, what is PDF? It's protecting your document. From whom? Are Russian bots infiltrating your job search to screw around with the wording on your resume?
I put my coaching has been, and I'm open to new ideas. If you attach your resume on a public space like LinkedIn, put it as a PDF so that nobody can take and play with it. However, when you apply for a job, use a Word doc.
Well, why would you put your resume on a public space anyway? I wouldn't.
Actually, I tell people nobody ever looks at it, but lots of people want to do it.
They
shouldn't. You can.
They shouldn't.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile basically functions as more of a narrative, personal way, and you can probably speak to this more than I, but the experience section of your LinkedIn profile is verbatim from the experience section of your resume. They should not deviate at all. Yeah. But I see people who post their resume on LinkedIn or on Indeed or Career Builder and Monster, and what you're doing there, you're doing two things, and neither of them are good for your career. One, you're basically saying, somebody find me, I'm available. Not, you're an important, you're an important, valuable commodity. Like, be selective about who sees it. And the other more nefarious thing is there aren't many, but there are some recruiters who are not scrupulous, who will grab publicly posted resumes, put you in their database, and then if you apply for a position where they have a relationship with the company, you're just out of luck. Yeah. And I just saw someone say that PDF prevents the formatting from getting screwed up, but ATS software takes your everyththing you've written out of the format and puts it into like a
fields.
Right. So don't worry. If you're really hung up on it, if you're emailing your resume to a person as an attachment and it makes you happy to PDF it, go for it, but never upload a PDF.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% to the applicant tracking system. Make it easy for that system to get that data. So I'm going to answer this question for you, Lynda. Somebody asked a question, said, Lynda, will you look at my resume? It's been a long time for me to get a job. So Lynda, I don't know who this person is, so they call themselves Galaxy S7. What I would encourage you to do is to find the job groups around town that in your area. In North Carolina, there's places in Raleigh and Charlotte and Greensboro, and they do that kind of work for free to help their members. Lynda does this as a business. I don't know that you're offering yourself to volunteer in that space.
Well, so here's what, ever since we've been in this, pandemic crisis, if somebody is financially challenged, I will give them some help pro bono. But yes, otherwise it is a business. And listen, for anybody, you don't have to become a client. My website is free and there's a ton of free information on there. But if you want to see what my clients' resumes look like and just get a visual to correspond with what I've been talking about, go on my website and look at the samples and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I encourage Galaxy, if it's a Teddy's advice was excellent, but if it is a financial challenge and you'd like me to look at it, my email address is on the website.
Yeah, cool. So I had another question here. Oh, so I got this a couple different times. Yeah, and Jankova said that a volunteer group that he's a part of, that I also volunteer in, they wanted their resumes in PDF form because their website did not show the Word documents as well. So that's why they're asking for PDF and presenting on their site.
But that organization isn't putting it through ATS software.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. You're only not PDFing it because of ATS software.
Yeah. And someone else asked, you know, are you saying don't put your resumes on LinkedIn? And your opinion was let your LinkedIn profile be your resume, which, by the way, I support that 100%.
100%. Anytime you post a resume, listen, your LinkedIn profile has your work experience plus a nice narrative of who you are, okay? But if you post the document itself as media, you're just begging for somebody to go along and scoop it up and say that you're in their database.
Yeah. Should we post resumes on Indeed?
No, same thing.
So if they're using a job board, should they just fill out the fields?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. So, cool. So here's another question. Oh, this is a good one. Randy, thoughts while I get myself back in check?
Yeah, just something real quick. I'm an old radio guy. When I say old, I mean old, right? So this is back when Reagan was president and Carter, and well, maybe not that far. But all right, but here's the deal. That was my life back up into the early 90s. And since then, I morphed into the human services, human resources, that kind of thing. If I wanted to go back to working in media, I did it. I was a round peg in a round hole back then. I've since gotten away from it for so long. How would I depict that on a resume? Because right now it's either off the resume because of age issues, or it's buried at the bottom of page 2.
Yeah, so I don't think the two experiences belong on the same resume because one is not relevant to the other. So when people want to go back to an earlier career, it's a challenge because depending on how long ago, and you're saying it was the 80s, well, you still have that fantastic radio voice, which, age can't take away from you. But the thing is, and this is one of the reasons we don't go back more than 15 years or so on the resume, nothing that was done that in 1980 is done the same way now. I was a university professor in the 1980s and early 90s. There were no smart boards. There was none of that kind of stuff. Like, I couldn't go back to be a classroom teacher now without having to learn the new software. And my gut feeling is that might be true for broadcasting as well. So the first problem is going to be, if it's been that long, is how are you going to demonstrate that you know all the new techniques and software and all that sort of thing. And so I would include, for you, I would include in your summary of qualifications that you've been using Zoom, that I would mention it and then just say in your summary of qualifications, since leaving broadcast media in the 1980s, I've been working in human services, and then just allude to the software and the technology, the contemporary software and technology that you're familiar with.
And Randy, when you go for an interview, dude, do not flip out your flip phone and get on the phone. I'm telling you, man, that's not going to help you.
Hang on. I think I'm getting a fax. Just a second.
Oh no.
Here's Glenn's shared that overhyped resumes are just plaguing the systems and companies, and most people, for the most part, are looking for character and credibility. And furthermore, as soon as you walk in the door, either with this or with this, you're dating yourself.
Yeah, but I think those are two separate issues. So first of all, I hope nobody's got their mobile device viewable when you walk in, because that's just rude, But I think character and credibility, so this person referenced overhyped. Overhyping, like I said, I have some clients where I want to say to them gently, and did you rest on the 7th day? Because they've got this godlike conception of themselves. That's bad, and it's a turn off to the person reading it, as much as just selling yourself short and couching your language and kind of, well, I helped. And maybe you did something. Okay, you didn't help, you did something. So yeah.
Cool. Here's the other question I had for you. And by the way, great questions, folks. And Denise, I'm sorry, I missed Denise asked about a point you made and I lost the context. I lost the timing. So I totally lost it. So if I can remember, I'll try to bring it back up. So I'm sorry, Denise. Any other questions? Please use the Q&A box. I'm trying to watch the chat and Q&A and it's making me dizzy, kids. Education credentials, Lynda. And one of my thoughts in that context is that one of my lines I talk about in regarding your LinkedIn profile, and would love to hear your perspective from LinkedIn and resume. But I tell people, now I'm getting very satirical here, you should talk about the colleges you went to, the high schools, the elementary schools, the preschool. What are your thoughts?
Well, were you being sarcastic?
Just a smidge.
Well, we know how well sarcasm's been playing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, let's put it this way. There are plenty of people who have had really successful careers and they're just awesome employees. And they say to me, but I don't have a college degree. Do you think I'm going to be able to move up and move ahead? And I'm like, you know something, it doesn't matter what it says in the job posting. If you have done X number, you know, these cool things, I don't care that your butt sat in a chair in a classroom. I mean, big deal. I have a ton of educational credits. It doesn't make me any smarter than anyone else. So what I would say to people who have degrees is, if that's the most important thing about you, if that's what you're going to lead with, that's sad.
Unless you're a recent college grad. If you're a recent college grad, then
well, I work with a lot of, or at least until this all happened, a lot of college seniors, and they have at the very top, you know, degree from Harvard, and you know, really, if that's what you want to go on, you know, I'm sorry. What projects did you work on in school that were interesting? What kind of did you work full time at Rite Aid or at Starbucks while you were putting yourself through school, showing me that you have grit and determination? Yeah, your education goes at the very bottom. It is the least important thing about you. It's there, but let's say if you didn't have, if you, you know, and you don't put, if you started at a community college, got an associate's degree, transferred to a four-year college, you don't need to put your associate's degree because that was a stepping stone to getting the four-year degree. The bachelor's is what matters there. If you have a graduate degree, you would list that as well. And the major, don't put your GPA.
what about dates of education?
Leave it off.
Leave dates
unless you graduated within the last 2 or 3 years, because you know ageism is a serious thing. They're going to find out how old you are when they do a background check anyway. So at least get yourself in there for an interview and sell yourself, but don't put it there.
They're going to do background checks.
Yeah.
Hey, Teddy, we've got just a few minutes left. So Lynda, anything that you wanted to touch on that maybe we didn't get to? Something, if you had to leave us with 1 or 2, 3 key points, either got to do this or never do that. Are there any things that we can kind of take away as a last word or two?
Yeah, I mean, I would sit down and make a list of things that you did, specifics, and curate a list of, you know, 5 to 8 to 10 of those things and lead that off on your resume. And if you want ideas, take a look at the samples on my website. The other thing is, don't apply for a million jobs. Apply for jobs, you know, where you can start networking your way in the company via email. There's a tool, there are a couple of tools, and some of them are free, that help you. One is called findthatemail.com. And the other is an extension on your browser called hunter.io. Mm-hmm. And those help you find people's work emails. And you can, if you email the person who you really want them to see your resume and attach your resume and put in the body of the email. This is like better than a cover letter, because nobody reads cover letters. They're the biggest waste of time. But you put in the body of the email a really short, like, I applied for the job by, on your ATS system, but here are 3 reasons why I think you want to look at my resume. And you can get that person's work email by using those extensions, or you can figure it out. Go on the company website, look at their protocols and just guess.
Yeah. Or network appropriately and find ways to get people to introduce you to those people.
That is the most important. And by the way, statistics show that 80% of jobs are found exactly the way Teddy described.
Yeah, and people like you, Lynda, love it when you're in HR and you can have somebody figuratively tap you on the shoulder and say, I know you're sitting on 500 applicants, but Teddy Burris mentioned he'd applied. Wonder if you could take a second look at his application.
That's how I hired people. And by the way, the best employees, and I read this in the Harvard Business Review, corroborated what I knew anecdotally.
Yep.
When an employee says, a current employee says, hey, would you take a look at this resume from someone in my LinkedIn network? Those people are much better hires, because nobody's going to recommend somebody that's going to make them look bad.
I want to get the URLs from you later for hunter.io and find that email app when you get a chance later, Lynda, and put that in the show notes. So,
okay, hunter.io is.
I'll get it from you later.
Okay, it's an extension.
Lynda,
Sure.
This is great. I really appreciate you jumping in and sharing with us and, making us think and look at this differently and sharing your ideas. Thank you very much for showing up.
Well, it was my pleasure. And thank you to everyone for your great questions.
Yeah, resumes are interesting. Yeah, resumes are interesting. They're very often subjective, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but it sure helps to get some good guidelines for somebody who's lived it on both sides, as a hiring official and then as somebody who has successfully coached people's working on resumes so that they do get the interview. Because
how about I was someone looking for a job just like everybody else.
And so you've seen it from all 3 sides then. Yeah. The 3-sided coin. But thanks again, Lynda. I really appreciate you taking some time out, and be safe. And again, thank you. And thanks to Teddy for introducing me to you as well.
We got 2 minutes, Randy. And let's, would you tell us who our guests are next week?
I would, but I'd have to shoot you. No, I know who they are. There's a lot of stuff going on right now with filing for unemployment. What is the government doing to try to support businesses, to try to support people who are out of a job? How does this all make sense? Where can I get answers? And so I've got 2 folks coming in as guests. One is from NCWorks to talk about the unemployment insurance and all of the questions that people have relative to how to file, to get answers to questions. When is my check coming and all that kind of stuff. So what's going on at the state level. And then also have Mike Fenley coming in. He is Senator Richard Burr's field representative for this part of the state. And he's going to be coming in to talk about what's going on legislatively at the federal level. So we'll have the federal folks and we'll also have the state folks. And hopefully we'll be able to make some more sense of what's going on out there, because there's a lot of moving parts to this whole COVID thing. And we hope to get it squared away for you next week, give you the latest up-to-date information to help you navigate through this process.
And if anybody on this call would like a different conversation or another topic, all you got to do is, reach out to Randy or I and let us know that you'd like to hear a conversation. Maybe you have a speaker who's absolutely stellar and who will upstage Randy and I all the day long.
Of course.
Those speakers to join us. So let us know. So
find us on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, if you can't find me, look, we put our names on the screen. It's right there on the screen. See them all right. If you can't find us, then we're screwing up big time. So, all right, 1 o'clock. Lynda, again, thank you. We'll talk another day. I'll get those URLs from you and put it on the show notes. Randy, it's an honor and a privilege to hang out with you today.
Thank you, folks. Take care. See you.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.